views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening. Welcome to Bronx Talk. There's no secret about what's going on in the Bronx, in New York, in the United States of America, and that is the 2020 election. To be right up front, we're recording this on Friday at about 12 noon, and there could be changing dynamics and changing numbers between now and the time it airs Monday night. But we're going to tell you what we know at this point, and I think a lot of what we're going to talk about is going to be relevant to a lot of people. And I'm thrilled. We have a very powerful panel this evening. We actually have three Michaels. One is Assemblyman Michael Blake, who is also a vice chair of the DNC. Nice to have you with us, Assemblyman. And also Michael Benjamin, who is on the editorial board of the New York Post. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Benjamin. And Michael Hinman, who is the editor of the Riverdale Press. Nice to have you with us, Mr. Hinman. We have Margaret Groarke. Professor Groarke is a political science professor at Manhattan College. She also worked the polls this week, which was, I think, a very interesting thing to get a firsthand report on the literal election front lines. And all the way out there in Allentown, Pennsylvania, we know how significant the state of Pennsylvania is right now to all of us. It is my longtime friend, José Martínez at WFMZ in Allentown. Nice to have you with us, sir. Let's start with you, Assemblyman Blake. The DNC, I guess at this point, when we woke up Friday morning, we saw that Joe Biden had taken the lead in both Georgia and Pennsylvania. I'd have to think that you and your colleagues at the DNC are pretty optimistic about his chances at this point to be number 46.
Can you tell from the smile on my face right now, Gary, about
Well,
how we're feeling?
I don't know if you've gotten any sleep, so I can't quite tell.
Haven't had much sleep in the last week or so. I've been in Philly about a week, and I'm sure, Jose can of course attest to this in Allentown. We felt we were going to win this thing for a while, but people just had to be patient, And the reality is, vote by mail came in a historic manner. This is very new in Pennsylvania in particular, but it's breaking the way we anticipated. You look at Philly. Philly is essentially breaking 90-10 for Biden. You just can't catch up on numbers like that. And the Black community in Philly, the Latino community in Allentown and Lehigh Valley collectively, the Black community out in Pittsburgh brought this home. But I think when this is all said and done, the collective story on why Biden and Harris have won this thing is the Latino community in Arizona and Nevada, and the Black community in Philly, Atlanta, Milwaukee, and Detroit. And at the end of the day, yes, we're exhausted, but it's good exhaustion.
You actually have hit on something that I have been, frankly, on my own social media talking about. And in my own analysis, I'm just going to rewind the clock. If everybody remembers, early Wednesday morning at 4 a.m., all of a sudden, because certainly President Trump was thinking very optimistically, he went on TV and talked about it, that he was going to win. When the votes came to Milwaukee City Hall, all of a sudden, it was like, wait a minute, he may not get Wisconsin. And that all of a sudden changed the dynamic. And then you go to what happened in Detroit, and I'm going somewhere with this, everybody. Then it happened in Detroit, then Philadelphia, or Philadelphia is still processing, and then Atlanta. It seems to me, and I'm just going to throw this out and anybody can weigh in, that the Black Lives Matter movement actually helped determine, if not directly determined, the presidential election and the next president of the United States. I think it's a tremendous example of a social movement having political effect. Assemblyman, I'll let you weigh in, and then we'll let some of the others weigh in on that theory.
Well, look, despite COVID-19, despite the challenges of police brutality, despite Black businesses closing, Black people showed up and helped save democracy. But I also want to be very clear: the Latino community in Allentown, Lehigh, the Latino community in Arizona, Nevada, and very specifically the Puerto Rican community in Central Florida, because there's been a lot of confusion. It's not a monolithic block. Everyone keeps talking about what happened in South Florida. You have Amy Mercado, who won her race in Central Florida. That's what saved democracy. And, at the end of the day, everybody just had to be patient. It didn't really matter what Trump was talking about. The numbers are the numbers. And so, we will be saying President-elect Biden and Vice President-elect Harris because communities of color said enough is enough.
Jose,
another thing I think played a part besides the Black Lives Matter movement. I think it's been years of the presidents angering Democrats, angering a lot of Americans, who made it a point to come out this year. A lot of organizing all across the country for this election, and the Democrats who had issues with each other, put it aside. They had one mission, which was to elect the next president as a Democrat, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris as the vice president. That's what brought it all together.
And
the country is so divided by you have the president has his staunch supporters, and then you have the other side. 75 million came out and voted for Joe Biden, and that's what's going to carry the day. And they did it in all the key states. And as Assemblyman Blake said, the African American community, the Asian, the Hispanics came out. They voted for Joe Biden and brought it over the top. And that's what the president has a difficult time accepting.
Gary, we can't forget Stacey Abrams though in Georgia too. I mean,
absolutely,
what she did after
just heard 500,000
election. I mean that's a lot, and I mean, and I think that was obviously the difference that you're seeing in Georgia. So I mean, whether Biden ends up carrying Georgia or not, we don't know as of Friday afternoon. But if he does, I mean, you have to give a lot of thanks to what Stacey Abrams and what her people did over there. So
we can't ignore the beautiful irony that the district that put it over in Georgia is the late great John Lewis's district in Clayton County.
I think
can't ignore the irony of that's what's going to bring it home, and equally for us to keep patience, because you're going to hear about recounts in Georgia and recounts in Wisconsin. That's just statutory if it's 0.5% or below. But this was years of organizing. For Stacey Abrams and Nikema Williams, who's the new chair in Georgia as well. But we just can't ignore this. This is a dominating victory. It's going to be 306 electoral votes.
I want to bring Margaret Groarke, Professor Groarke, into the equation. You sat at the polls. I had the sense when I did early voting that there was a compulsion that people who voted Democratic felt compelled. They just, one way or another, I'm going to make sure to vote. Did you have the sense when you sat there and watched people come into the polling place?
Yeah, we talked to a number of people who were voting for the first time or for the first time in a long time. And not all of those people were 18 years old. Some of them were a lot older and had skipped a lot of elections and chose to participate in this one. Obviously, I don't know how they all voted. But I thought it was interesting how many people I talked to said that they had voted. Also, this was the first time, remember, that we in New York have the first presidential election where we've been able to do early voting. It's only our second election where we've been doing early voting. And, those of us who've been trying to encourage people to make use of this new practice of early voting often said, well, if you go early voting, you won't have to stand online like you will on election day. And it really ended up being the reverse.
That's right.
There were such long lines at early voting. People were so enthusiastic to go and vote on the first day or very early. 12,000 people voted at Intech. So that's a lot of kind of Riverdale folks. I live in Kingsbridge, and I could early vote at Monroe College, and over 10,000 people, well over 10,000 people voted there. So we didn't actually have a long line on election day. We had people waiting at 6 o'clock in the morning to come in, and there was a bit of a wait. Some people waited an hour early in the morning, but as the day went on, it was kind of light because so many people had already voted. I think when we see the full results, we're going to see that we had bigger turnout than 2016, but that a lot of it came in early or absentee ballots. Let's bring on José Martínez over there in Allentown, Pennsylvania. A very interesting op-ed piece in the Times about the quote unquote, and they reject the idea, the Hispanic vote, because as Assemblyman Blake just said, it's not monolithic. Give us a little wrap up of the mood in Pennsylvania with the Hispanic community, if it's unified. I mean, certainly we've heard, especially in Florida, about a split vote. Give us your assessment of what you've seen.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we've been talking about the Latino vote as if we are a big family, and that's the way some elected officials refer to our community, and that is the biggest mistake. And I think 2020 election has shown that, you know, we are not the same people voting the same way. And only here in Pennsylvania, we have two migration processes happening. One, Puerto Ricans and Dominicans that have moved from the Bronx, who have relocated to Allentown and Reading. There are two cities that right now are almost 60% Latino. And that is a big number that is basically contradicting every single issue that the suburbs around the cities are trying to pull out through Trump campaign. So this is one process. A lot of people moving from New York over the last few years relocated down here, buying houses, opening businesses. These people are mostly Democrats. And we also find this large group of Puerto Ricans that have moved over the last 3 years after Hurricane Maria and Irma and the earthquakes to this area because it's cheaper to live down here. So all these voters, this is the result that we're getting right now. And this is just a preliminary result, but we're talking about 70% of Puerto Ricans voted for Biden. And in Miami, if you go to Miami or this area in Florida, you find that 52% of Cuban Americans voted for Trump. So you see the split of these two communities within the same Latina communities. And the other thing is Puerto Ricans are US citizens and they can vote once they are here in the mainland. So a lot of the conversations are including everybody, a lot of people that have gone through different circumstances to become a US citizen. When you're Puerto Rican, you just have to show up and say, I'm Puerto Rican, I want to vote here. That is a different story than the one that a person that has gone through a long, process through immigration needs to go through to get to that. I
want to ask Michael Hinman about what this says about our democracy. To me, in many ways, almost more than just about any time in my own memory, this defines American democracy. So there is, as José Martínez just explained, a shift in the population. You can't take people for granted. I'm just summarizing everything. I mean, Hispanics, many of them are conservative from a religious point of view, and they have, faith issues that kept them from voting Democratic, and they stayed with Donald Trump. They have a great desire for jobs and the economy. Talk to me about what all of what we've seen over this week means for democracy in the United States of America.
I mean, one thing that it does, I hope that it helps all of us understand the diversity that's in our country. And, and not just that if we break it down into different demographics and that each demographic is going to perform exactly the same, and I think that which is kind of almost ironic, but it almost seems like the Republicans picked that up a little bit quicker than Democrats, especially in Florida. When you're talking about, especially the Cuban population in Miami, the Republicans went down there with a very specific message, which was basically saying, the Democrats are going to bring socialism and communism, to America. And this is stuff that they escaped. So, so that's going to resonate much differently. So, I felt that there was times, that the party at the national level, we're treating different demographics as if they were all going to react the same exact way, but everybody's different no matter where you're at with that. And I think that that doing that, all of your messaging that you have to have, that it really needs to be like, that's where you have to start really looking at like hyper local targeting and such. And and as an editor of a community newspaper, I think that's something that's really important. That we're so locked into the macro message that we sometimes miss the micro message.
Can I jump in? I think this is important here, because I have to respectfully disagree with Michael Hinman on the point about the national party dynamic. So I think it's important from the media perspective. The entire argument they've tried to make about success in the Latino community has been about what happened in South Florida, as opposed to separating the dynamics. First, let's talk about how the DNC, we were able to purchase and track the 787 area code, as Jose mentioned, particularly from Puerto Rico. Brothers and sisters that came here to the mainland. Everyone think about Florida first, but Pennsylvania was actually the second largest composition. And so we were then able to engage within the Commonwealth to do organizing in a very targeted way. You look at the success. We're not winning in Arizona or in Nevada the way we are if you're not having very targeted, very aggressive Latino outreach. Moreover, we had a very intentional Hispanic evangelical approach that people had not been watching and paying attention to. Whether it be Lou Cortez or Gabe Salguero and others, obviously the team at Esperanza itself, that engagement that national media may not be seeing allows for you to be able to win in targeted areas 70-30 as opposed to 60-40. So I just think it's one of those scenarios where, look, obviously we're excited about the win, but I want to make sure that we're not missing that the element of very targeted approaches from the party was happening. Now you can simultaneously acknowledge.
But Assemblyman, I think that you can definitely. I think that there's definitely praise that has to be given, especially in those specific areas. But we can't overlook, where the party kind of probably, overlooked. And in terms of what happened in Miami, that shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have been a surprise. And that was the two things. If it wasn't a surprise, if that was like, hey, we're focusing on these areas, and that's what we're doing, that would be one thing. But it was like a total surprise.
No, it was a total surprise to everyone else. That's why I think it's important. Like the reality is, when you look at where the numbers were, and I think this is the intentionality of it, where was focus in the last few days, and where were the intentionality of the numbers itself? And I think what happened overwhelmingly is that people presumed, oh, well, this was going to happen. You can't ignore the socialism language has impact, absolutely. However, if we are only assessing Latino success based upon Miami, we are missing on what happened everywhere else.
Michael Benjamin wants to talk.
I just want to add,
except Florida.
But the Miami thing also underscores a split between older Cubans and the younger ones. 50% of Cubans went for the president, probably older ones. Younger ones went for Obama. Younger ones went for Joe Biden. And that's what we're seeing. It's going to shift over time. And as Michael says, someone Blake said, where Puerto Ricans are in Central Florida, the vote was for Biden. In Pennsylvania, it was for Biden. My brother was a poll worker in Philadelphia, in the East Falls neighborhood. 90% of the people who were registered to vote in his division voted.
Wow.
Most of them probably voted for Biden. That is that kind of energy that was out there across the nation for Democrats. And it wasn't because they didn't organize. Democrats ran real good micro campaigns in those communities. They knew where they had to win. They did it right. They did it by the numbers. They did it better than Hillary Clinton did. They learned from 2016 and the party focus. I give credit to Selman Blake and the others who are in charge of the DNC and working with their state parties to win in the states where Joe Biden needed to win. We can't base things just on New York City and New York State.
We really would be remiss if we didn't allow José Martínez to weigh in on what you've heard. So I'd be curious, certainly speaking as a Hispanic man from a reporter from Allentown, PA, what do you think of what you just heard?
Well, part of the problem is what we're doing right now is that we don't allow to include those voices in the conversation. that's what the community has been trying to tell Republicans and Democrats this year. You know, we talked to Latinos even on the election day, and they said, I haven't seen anybody. I haven't seen the Republicans. I haven't seen the Democrats here in Allentown, in Redding areas. And I'm talking about people who have been here for so long that they feel that they are not part of the country. They're not part of the city. They're not part of the county. Nobody cares about them. And then all of a sudden, everybody's fighting for this vote. And that is the problem. I just did an interview right before I jumped in here with Voto Latino in Miami. And they were saying there is a lot to learn for the next election, you know, and it's part of this conversation that elected officials should have with the community without being condescending. And let me just finish with this. That's the feeling that the Latina community has. They feel that they're kind of like a toy.
One of the things I don't think the DNC did well at all, they ignored, frankly, white working America in the middle American states. Joe Biden claims now he's going to be the great unifier. What I have a suggestion of what he ought to do to get out there and engage those people and show them that Democratic policies can work for them, that they can get jobs, and we can change the way we do things. Professor Groarke, what do you think a President Biden would need to do to begin to unify a very fraught country?
I guess I'd just like to question the premise that you started with, like that the Democrats have ignored the white working class. I think the Democratic Party has tried to talk about the need to raise the wages, the need to create jobs, the need to have a fairer tax structure. I mean,
yeah, but that message didn't get through the
let me
middle
just finish
America.
my sentence. Whether like people, to what extent a certain number of people have bought that or not is another question. I mean, I think, there are some people who, for whatever reason, are like find more appeal from the anti-immigrant, like anti-international trade kind of argument that Donald Trump made. I don't think that that's a beneficial agenda for the white working class. And, I don't think I have a good, there's we have to recognize that some part of that is about race and going for a party that is trying to, recreate an imagined past where, white people were more in charge. So, that's a struggle for the Democratic Party, but I don't think it's that they don't have an agenda for the white working class. I think, raising wages and creating more jobs, including green jobs, is a great agenda for the white working class.
I'm curious, Assemblyman Blake, was there a ground game in Oklahoma? Was there a ground game in South Dakota? Or did they just kind of assume, we're not getting it anyway, let's not waste our resources there? And if not, is this something that President Biden could begin to do and say, look, we're gonna change the energy in your town. We're gonna bring in solar power. We're gonna if you go through Texas, there are wind farms all over the place. Your thoughts, Assemblyman?
So let's separate the questions here. You have to win before you can govern. So if the question is about what was happening in South Dakota and Oklahoma, where Joe Biden was going to win those states, versus let's look at the states in the Midwest, like Wisconsin or Michigan, which we did win. And you actually start looking at some of the data. There was an exit poll of, compared to 4 years ago, is your family's financial situation better today or worse today? For those that they said it was worse today, they broke for Biden 86-12, right? When you're looking at the white vote in particular, white vote essentially broke down 52-46 towards Trump itself. So just on the numbers of it, I want to start there. It would not accurate at all to say we didn't focus on the white working class itself, in which everybody's part of the working class. I always get amazed by that part of the conversation itself. Now, the broader dynamic is he will be a president that's going to govern the entire country. And, I had the opportunity to work for him and President Obama. I know what they did. And one thing we said often within the White House, he was the one in charge of the Recovery Act. there's probably no person I trust more to turn the country around from an economic disaster being him. And so that will impact everyone across the country, and in particular, the small business approach. One of the very specific points that did resonate is that Vice President Biden, soon to be President-elect Biden, said that 50% of the next COVID relief bill towards small businesses would go to small businesses, 50 employees or less. That's a game changer. That's never happened before at any scale in any government. And that's the kind of thing that would have tremendous impact for everyone, whether if you're in South Dakota or the South Bronx.
Follow up on what Margaret said, though. Margaret made a very important point, I think, that we keep ignoring in this country for a very long time. It's not just issues of white working class economics. It's about race in America and how you approach the white working class. You have to address the elephant in the American living room.
Right.
If we don't do that, it's not going to change. We're going to do the same thing in 2024.
He's going to have to do that because that's the dialogue in America right now. There's no way that he can say that he's going to govern and not address the notion of race. Go ahead, Jose, and then Michael Hinman.
Yeah, and I think, Michael's right. But listen, people should be blamed, and who's guilty is guilty. And I think we are at a time in history that we should be allowed to tell the truth, and that's a problem. We've been blamed. The Latina community have been blamed, and we've been here for hundreds of years, and we're still having to go, you go to a grocery store and somebody looks at you weird, and why? Right. Let's blame that person for looking at me weird and not just saying, oh, he feels threatened. He doesn't feel threatened. He hates me because of the way I look. Let's just talk like that.
And
that
I think
way,
your discussion, we're almost out of time,
Yeah.
Jose. I think your discussion earlier about the migration of people from, let's say, New York, or Hispanics or Puerto Ricans from New York City to these places. Man, you could drive anywhere in this country. You've got to acknowledge that this is becoming, I don't want to say an international country, but a diverse country.
That it seems that part of the biggest issue that we have just overall is that the conversations only seem to start when it gets close to an election or somebody's running for office. So, I think that what's really important for any administration, whether it's a Biden administration or any future administration or any government at any level, is that conversation has to be ongoing all the time. That can't just start up, every couple of years or every 2 or 3 years. That has to be a very long, ongoing conversation, because then you can make change, and it's not just let's make promises and then maybe make change and then we'll slowly get it going. I mean, it just really has to be a constant dialogue.
And I think the economic thing that just about all of us really addressed one way or another is a very big thing. If you can show people that somebody of color is not taking your livelihood away or going to destroy your town, but is going to work with you and as a community, build a strong community, I think everybody would get on board.
You talked about campaigning in South Dakota. We are stuck with this ridiculous electoral college map, which makes it ridiculous for a Democrat to campaign in South Dakota or in upstate New York and try to win people over. And, we're looking at a situation which a person who's 4 million votes ahead, we're, counting every last vote in Georgia. We really, we need to break out of this if we want to think about reaching out to new groups of people.
And unfortunately, I know Michael Benjamin has some strong thoughts about it, but we don't have enough time to get to it. Listen, we have just had a great dialogue on Bronx Talk this evening. Assemblyman Michael Blake, thank you. José Martínez from WFMZ, good luck there in Allentown. Michael Benjamin, keep cranking it out for us at the New York Post. We appreciate it. Margaret Groarke from Manhattan College, thank you. And Michael Hinman from the Riverdale Press, thank you. Thank our producer, Stephen Powell. Great show tonight. And hopefully we'll have a chance to bring you all together again for dialogues just like this. So stay safe, wear your mask, stay socially distant, and let's continue to build our democracy in America. Good night.